Hi, everybody. Today is Monday, June 16th, 2025, and our friend Paul Roberts is back with us. Welcome.
Thank you, Nima.
Paul, what's going on with the foreign policy of the United States in the Middle East while negotiating with Iranians? And the day before that, they were talking with her on Sunday, and the day before, they have Donald Trump said, I don't know if you saw the way that they were trying to picture the situation. Marco Rubio said we didn't know about it. We have nothing to do with it. And then Donald Trump said we knew, we were prepared for this. It's unbelievable. What's going on, Paul, with the foreign policy of the United States?
I I'm not sure even the people making it know. Rubio was basically trying to protect all the bases, the U.S. bases in that region from Iranian retaliation. So he was doing his job and said, "Don't blame us. Don't hit our bases." And I think Trump was uh, he was emphasizing with Iran, look, I already told you what the deal is, and you haven't accepted it, and so you got hit, and you better hurry up and accept it. You can get hit again. So Trump is he calls negotiation uh, imposing a policy on Iran. That's what he means by negotiation. Iran doesn't get to negotiate at all. It just has to accept whatever Trump decides. And of course, Trump changes his mind all the time about what the deal is. In that sense, it's all funny, but I think it's very serious if Trump did indeed know ahead of time, and if it is true that the Israeli minister said that Israel carefully coordinated the whole attack with Washington, so that means the United States was part of the attack on Iran. I mean, it can't mean anything else. And so the question is, there's something duplicitous here. He's negotiating with Iran while he's preparing an attack on them. Um, Perhaps this deceived the Iranians, like Scott Ritter said. Scott Ritter said that Trump tricked them into not paying attention, so they were sitting duck for Israel. Well, that's kind of a dirty game to play. And I think that if people get that idea, whether it's true or not, it sort of demeans the president of the United States. It demeans Trump. Um, so I can't see how he benefited from what he said. And I can't see how he benefits from the attack. The Israelis have been trying to get the Americans to go to war for Iran for the longest time. It goes back to something that John Podhoretz, who was the editor of the Jewish magazine Commentary, wrote many years ago. The whole notion of 7 countries in 5 years came from John uh, Podhoretz in Commentary. I remember commenting on it at the time. It was a long time ago, and we've heard that again through the years from the neoconservatives themselves, from General Wesley Clark, and there's no doubt about it. And so, what we've done, I think we have got 5 of the 7. Well, we got Libya, Iraq, Syria, uh, Lebanon. Who else do we get? Libya, Syria, Iraq,
Is Somalia?
Somalia. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that only leaves Iran and Saudi Arabia. They're the other 2 on the list. And of course, the Iranians were probably the more formidable on the list. So, from what I understand of these attacks, the Israelis claimed initially that they had damaged the Iranian nuclear research facilities, but then it soon turned out that this wasn't true because they were too deep for the weapons the Israelis have. And so the Israelis now have said the Americans have to do it because they have these bunker buster bombs, and we don't have them. And so that Netanyahu is trying to drag Trump into this attack and turn it into a bigger deal. Well, the Iranian government, having been caught flat-footed, as it seems the Muslims always are, they never take the initiative. They're always caught flat-footed, and so Israel always comes out on top. But the Iranians, looking at the situation and learning what Trump has said, they may conclude they won't attack the American bases because it gives Trump an excuse to come with the bunker busting bombs and destroy all of their research facilities. So I think we don't know what reaction they will come up with, but I think that the Iranians will do like Putin and play like it's not really a war. That is some kind of terrorist action by the Israelis, like Putin pretended the attack on the Russian strategic forces was a terrorist act. So if you can redefine the war as something else, then you don't have to take the actions that you normally take. And so it may well be that the Iranians won't do much, or that they will confine their attacks to Israeli military facilities. In which case, some other excuse will have to be found for Washington to get involved and do Israel's work for them.
I'm afraid you've mentioned 7 countries being on the list, but it seems that it's 8. It's going to be 8 countries. Here is what Netanyahu said. Here is a video, a somehow old video, but here is what he said, Paul.
Mission that we have is to prevent a militant Islamic regime from meeting up with nuclear weapons, or from nuclear weapons meeting up with a militant Islamic regime. The first is called Iran, the second is called Pakistan, because if these radical regimes have nuclear weapons, they will not obey the rules that have been obeyed in the last almost 7 decades.
The only thing that comes to my mind that this guy wants a nuclear war, nothing less than that.
Well, nuclear war is a pretty nasty thing. I posted today an article by Stephen Starr. He's an expert on nuclear war, and he points out it only takes 3 Russian missiles to knock out the entirety of the United States. And they don't even have to be ground impact. They are up in the atmosphere, and they put out that electromagnetic force and shuts everything down, including all the nuclear reactors and all the cooling systems, so that they blow up. And it takes 3. And he points out there's something like, what is it, 12,000. So a nuclear war is far more dangerous than people understand. And you don't have to have hundreds of these things going off to kill everybody. I looked at Starr's work in the past, and I'm convinced 3 ICBMs explode in the atmosphere over the United States, one here, one here, one here. That's the end of the country, period. It's over and done with. There's nothing left. Nothing can work. There's no power. And there's no way to control the atomic reactors. They will poof, and there'll be nuclear explosions, and many of those are located near large cities. So the whole thing is ridiculous. Now, actually, Pakistan, that would be a hard nut to take on because they do have the weapons, and they've had them for some time, and they must have some kind of functioning command and control center because they're always on edge with India, which also has nuclear weapons. So, if Netanyahu picks a fight with Pakistan, it won't be good for Israel. And I don't think it's a fight that we could get into. That's too much into Russian and Chinese. It's too close, and at some point they will speak up. So, but certainly Saudi Arabia is in the sights. A while back, another Israeli minister said that Greater Israel had expanded. It was no longer from the Nile to the Euphrates. It was from the Nile into half of Saudi Arabia. So my own view is that nuclear war is likely, but it's more likely from a mistake. Someone gets information of incoming missiles, and they can't they can't correct it, or someone Putin having done nothing about the attack on the strategic bombing force. The next attack may be on Soviet ICBM silos. Well, I don't think Putin, for a second time, can dismiss an attack on Russian strategic forces as terrorism. And so that could set the thing off. When you have those kinds of weapons, it's really nonsensical to have those weapons because there's no way they can be used without destroying yourself. And why the world hasn't deep sixed weapons that, if they're used, destroy the planet, I don't know. Countries want them because it makes it harder for them to be bullied. Clearly, if Iran had nuclear weapons, the Israelis would not have made that attack recently. But I don't know what can be done about the weapons. They're there. More countries will get them, and sooner or later, one of them will get set off. We talked about it, I think, the last time. One of the most disturbing thing to me is that whoever green lighted that attack on the Russian strategic bombing fleet, whoever that was putting the whole world at risk. And Trump says he didn't know about it. So what he's saying is the president of the United States hasn't got any control over whether or not the United States ends up in war with Russia? Well, that's what it means. And I've noticed, Nima, it's very disturbing. No one wants to find out who gave the green light. Now, of course, nothing happened, but that's entirely due to Putin. Nobody could have known in advance that Putin was going to say, I'm going to ignore this, because the strategic doctrine of Russia requires a strategic response. So, luckily, Putin didn't do anything, but whoever gave that green light didn't know that. And so, whoever authorized or initiated that attack was playing with the life of the planet. And if it wasn't Trump, whoever it was committing the United States and the West to a possible nuclear conflict with Russia. Well, how can this happen? This should scare everybody to death. Everybody in the world should be scared to death that some third party took an action that could have initiated nuclear war between the United States and Russia. And the president of the United States says he knows nothing about it. So who gave the green light? You would think everybody would be trying to find out, and that something would be done to prevent some third party from giving a green light to nuclear war. It's only because of Putin that it didn't end in a nuclear war. And yet there's no talk about it, no discussion, nobody's even interested. I can't even get Johnson's Russian list to raise the issue. I've not seen any discussion of it. And yet it's the most extraordinary thing that has happened in my lifetime, actually, in my lifetime. Some third party took an action that, under Russian war doctrine, would have launched nuclear war. And nobody wants to find out who did it. What do you make of that, Nima?
I cannot believe that Donald Trump didn't know about it. He knew about it. The way that Paul, because he did the same with the case of Iran. He said that he didn't know about it. Then he came out said, "I knew about it. I was somehow that was the next," because he saw in the initial hours of the Israeli attack on Iran, he saw that Iran because they were somehow exaggerating the outcome of the attacks. Donald Trump just somehow felt it's the time to go out saying, I knew about it. It was an excellent job on the part of Israelis. Then, as time went by, he perceived that Israel is just getting hit by Iran. He said, "No, let's talk. Let's bring them together." He even called Putin. It's somehow amazing. I cannot believe that Putin, for a moment, he believed what Donald Trump said to him that he didn't know about the attack.
Well, let's assume that the president did know and gave the go ahead. Well, that's scary too.
Yeah. Exactly.
That's scary too. If Trump knew and gave a go ahead, it means either he didn't know about Russian war doctrine, or his aides didn't tell him, or his aides didn't know he was going to give the green light, or that Trump was willing to take that kind of risk with everybody, and that's not reassuring. And so my point it remains that having someone give a green light to an action that can initiate nuclear war over what? Over whether or not some peace negotiation about Ukraine is that worth it? No. So you see, Numa, I think what the whole
Paul, don't you think somehow, maybe somehow it would be out of the discussion, but don't you think these fanatic religious people feel that this would be the end of the world, that could everything be solved, and somehow the nuclear bomb would solve everything, because we have these sort of fanatics, and they may believe that they may want to destroy all of us because of the ideology they have.
Well, it's entirely possible. We had all these reports that the World Economic Forum and Bill Gates wanted to kill 7.5 billion people and only leave 500 million. This is what Klaus Schwab at the World Economic Forum, Bill Gates, they talked about how we had to reduce population, and it needed to go from 8 billion to 500 million. So the people who see humans as a problem may well want to be rid of them. Yeah, it's entirely possible. But the thing is, nobody would survive.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
so that's if you have people like that, like you described, you damn sure don't want them in positions of making decisions, especially about war. And that's why I think there should be a full scale investigation worldwide. Everyone should be demanding who green lighted that attack, who did it. We have to find out and establish some kind of restraints, because you see, the danger is magnified because nothing was done about it. So whoever did it can say, oh, look, Putin won't do anything. So next time we'll be more provocative. Well, sooner or later, you'll have to do something. And then everything's gone. So I wish people would understand how serious that attack was, and start demanding to know who green lighted it and what kind of restraints can be established to prevent that. Um, and of course, my view has always been the weapons should not exist. They're anti-planet,
Yeah.
not just our life, but everything. It's anti-planet, and there's no reason for them. You can't use them without destroying yourself and the world. So why have them? Um, Nima, there's no attention to reality. Let's take what Putin has said over and over, that the peace negotiations about Ukraine, uh, they must deal with the root cause of the problem. I've not heard Trump take that up. I've not heard any American foreign policy people talking about what the root cause of the problem is, certainly not in any terms that Putin means. For them, the root cause of the problem is Russia. That's it. So there's a lack of attention to the fundamental issue. Now, what is the root cause of the problem? It's NATO's presence on Russia's border. That's the problem. NATO has to be rolled back away from the Russian border. I would say back to the borders of 1997. Back to what the George Herbert Walker Bush administration said: there'd be no movement to the east, not even 1 inch of NATO. So they need to go back to that. And that takes the American missile base in Poland that's on the Russian border, and the American missile base in Romania that's on the Russian border away. Those missiles on Russia's border, they can carry either conventional warheads or nuclear warheads. and they can be changed overnight. And Russia hasn't got any way to know which warhead is in those missiles. So they're sitting there with you remember how upset the United States got because the Soviet Union put missiles in Cuba, 90 miles off our border. We almost had a nuclear war about that. If it hadn't been for President Kennedy and Khrushchev, there would have been. So if you remember how, well, you weren't alive in 1963 or whenever it was. If we remember how serious that was, well, we've done the same thing, except they're not even 90 miles from Russia's border. They're on the border. And that's an existential problem for the Russians. And what has Putin done to upset us? Nothing except to refuse to accept a unipolar world. He says, no, we're independent, we're sovereign. This is not a unipolar world. We don't accept American unilateralism. That's all he's done. Well, why is that aggressive? And he's matched that with appeals for years for a mutual security agreement with the West. He's tried over and over to get a mutual security agreement. Why? I don't know. How can he trust it? You would think sooner or later it would occur to Putin that what's the point of trying to get an agreement because the Americans have to keep them. And so it doesn't mean anything. So why am I so keen on having another meaningless agreement like the Minsk agreement? But he's inclined to bank on agreements with people who never keep agreements. People who stab you in the back in the midst of peace negotiations. See, it didn't just happen to Iran, it happened to the Russians, didn't it? The Russians were in peace negotiations with Ukraine, and allegedly Ukraine attacked the triad right in the middle of the negotiations. And so why does Putin and Lavrov still want to negotiate? It makes any sense. And of course, it doesn't make any sense why the Iranians are negotiating. I guess they just do whatever they can to avoid war. And as we've talked so many times, given the nature of the people trying to bring war to them, it just encourages them because the enemies of Iran and Russia conclude they won't fight. And so the provocations get worse. And sooner or later, they'll have to fight or surrender. And I think it's very difficult for Iran to fight because if they knock out the American bases in the region and the American aircraft carriers and close the Straits of Hormuz, then Trump has an excuse to use bunker busting bombs on their nuclear research facilities. And all of this could be resolved easily if they just simply had an inspection. And inspections can tell whether or not they're making weapons or just making nuclear power level enriched uranium or medical purposes, and shut down all this stuff about Iranian nukes. The Iranian nukes strike me, they're about as false as Saddam Hussein's weapons of mass destruction, as Assad's use of chemical weapons, as all the lies they told about Gaddafi in Libya. They make up lies as an excuse for acting aggressively. And for Iran, it's nuclear weapons. Well, they first should check and see if there are any. And I don't know why the Iranians would refuse an inspection. It's better than what's happening.
The problem, Paul, by the way, is that you mentioned bunker buster bombs. We know that they use B-2 bombers, and these are bunker, but and B-52. They've used them in Yemen. They couldn't achieve the result they wanted to achieve. They tried to just destroy the ammunition of Yemenis, Houthis. They couldn't achieve that. They know. And just before 2 hours ago, I talked with Ted Postal, Professor Ted Postal. He technically described to us, to the audience, that it's not possible to destroy the Iranian nuclear facilities. It's impossible to reach them. He to show the pictures, the, the type of structures they've been used, the type of, it's somehow some, it's like a diamond. And he showed that any sort of attack on these facilities is going to be just fruitless, and they cannot achieve what they want to achieve. And here is the question on it seems to me somehow, if Donald Trump, let's assume Donald Trump knew about it as he mentioned, and he went along with the plan on the part of Netanyahu, it seems to me that they convinced him that they can change the Iranian, they can do the so-called regime change in Iran.
Yeah.
That's why maybe he was convinced by the administration, maybe the Israelis. And how do you find it? What's your speculation on that?
Well, uh, that was one of the reasons that Washington forced Putin. That was one of the reasons Washington forced Putin into going into Donbass, because they thought it would. They knew he wasn't ready for the war. He wasn't prepared, and that it would not go all that well, and maybe could be used to discredit Putin with Russians and lead to regime change. Because a large, I don't know how large, but there's a percentage of the Russian professional and intellectual class that seem to be more aligned with the West than with Russia. And so the neoconservatives took the line that we can use this conflict to destabilize Putin. So, and also you got to remember, some years ago, we tried to, we interfered in an Iranian presidential election. And I think we sponsored something called the Green Revolution in Iran. And we had a large number of Iranians, especially the young, who were tired of the religious restrictions. They want to be decadent, just like Western youth. And so we thought we could destabilize Iran back then. I don't think it came very close to success, but it had a huge sponsorship in the Western media and Western governments and in American efforts. So, yeah, they can say, look, if the Iranian government can't prevent all of these missile strikes, killing people in apartment buildings in Tehran, and the latest headline news, you don't know if it's true or not, particularly if it comes from the American media, but it says that Iranians are fleeing Tehran. Iranians, fearful of their life from the Israeli attacks, are fleeing Iran, fleeing Tehran, the capital. And so they're trying to create an impression that the Iranians will feel that the government has caused them to come under relentless attacks, and the attacks don't stop, and the government can't do anything, and that the only remedy is to get a different government that comes to terms with the Israelis and the Americans. So this is certainly a belief in Washington. It's a long-time belief that Washington has had, and of course it puts in motion the forces that support it, all the propaganda and everything else. I would have no idea whether it would succeed in Iran.
No, the pictures, by the way, they're using the pictures that you're talking about, the mainstream media in the United States, the picture and the videos they're using to show that Iranian are just getting out of Tehran. Just that's false, because that's a normal. We know Tehran is a very big city. That's why usually during the day they have more than 12 million people working in Tehran. They're gonna get back to their homes at night and at the evening. But this sort of traffics that they're showing in these videos, it's normal for anybody who knows Iran, who knows Tehran. That's a normal picture. Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, well, I'm not surprised. I'm not saying any of it is true. I was just showing how the propaganda is developing that supports Washington's notion that you could have regime change in Iran, and so they're creating circumstances in which that type of regime change could happen. They're creating the propaganda circumstances, getting the American people, the Europeans, ready for it, accustomed to thinking that way. So I don't know. Now it's very interesting what you said. This expert told you about the inability to penetrate the Iranian nuclear research facilities. I take it that they're either too far underground, and or they're too far underground, but they are constructed in a unique way that the shock and the explosive force doesn't have the intended effect. And so, well, then that's fine with me. I have no objection. But apparently the Israelis don't know it, or the Washington doesn't know it. So again, it's a question of people acting without good intelligence. But on the other hand, if what Netanyahu really wants is to drag America into it, then the bunker buster bombs serve that purpose, because we would have to deliver them, and whether they worked or not, it would have committed us into the war. And I think that's what Netanyahu wants. The next step can be, well, they weren't powerful enough. The tricky Iranians have built an impenetrable bunker, and you have to use nukes. And so the next thing they'll say, well, how big of a tactical nuke do we need? And that's one likely direction for the talk to go and the policy to go. So I was hoping that Trump, having claimed Gaza in a joint press conference with Netanyahu, would stick to the plan he sort of floated of an American colonial empire in the Middle East in place of Greater Israel. And I was hoping that all those negotiations he had not long ago in Saudi Arabia with the Saudis was to convince them to be partners in this empire. And I was hoping he would approach the Iranians in the same way. But apparently not. Or apparently the power of the Israel lobby in the United States is just too much for Trump. And they may have been told to contact him and let him know that he'd better follow Netanyahu's plan in the Middle East and not his. It's entirely possible. It's very, very difficult for anybody in the United States government, anybody, any branch of government, to go against the Jewish lobby. It just can't be done and survive. And no one has succeeded in doing it, I don't think, since President Eisenhower, who stopped the assault on Egypt by Israel and the British and the French, I think, when they moved in to retake the Suez Canal from Israel. I think that was the last effective time that an American president told Israel where to get off. And they haven't done it since. And even shortly after that, they did nothing about the Israeli attack on the USS Liberty. There were over 200 American naval casualties from this attack, and they did nothing about it except cover it up for Israel. So if you won't even protect your own military services, it shows you're not in a very strong position. So Trump, has been very much in Israel's camp, and the really rich Jewish contributors to his campaign. I mean, you're talking about really rich people, and then of course they have the Israel lobby has the House and the Senate by the short hairs. They don't dare speak against Israel. And they now have even our prestige Ivy League universities who will not let the students protest an act of genocide. The Israel lobby can make tenure decisions inside American universities, even Catholic ones. So, and Trump's always been in their pocket. People maybe forget who was the first head of state that moved their embassy to Jerusalem. It was Trump. People may not know why you weren't supposed to move the embassy to Israel, because when you do that, it implies it's Israel's capital. And under all the arrangements that had been worked out, it was supposed to be a shared city and not Israel's capital. And so no one would put the embassy in Jerusalem. Well, Trump broke that up. So I suppose that his effort to break free when he said Gaza is America's, and we're going to make a resort and a beautiful place and all that, that Netanyahu didn't challenge him at the time at the press conference, but he probably figured he could turn that off. And maybe that's what happened. So I've rambled on. I don't know. There's no
Paul,
way of knowing.
what's in my opinion, what's going on between Iran and Israel and the way that Donald Trump let it happen is somehow it's so much dangerous because of two reasons, in my opinion. One of them is if they do, we know that just considering what's going on right now, it doesn't seem that the United States wants to get involved in the conflict with Iran. But Netanyahu has two options to force the United States into the conflict. One of them would be a false flag operation on Iran on U.S. bases in the Middle East. and they're gonna do something just showing that Iran is doing this to bring the United States into the conflict. The second would be this interview that Netanyahu gave yesterday or the day before yesterday gave to Fox News. Here is what he said.
Nuclear threat, and I want to talk about President Trump. You just said Iran tried to assassinate President Trump twice. Do you have intel that the assassination attempts on President Trump were directly from Iran?
Through proxies, yes. Through their intel, yes. They want to kill him. Look, he's enemy number one. He's a decisive leader. He never took the path that others took to try to bargain with him in a way that is weak, giving them basically a pathway to enrich uranium, which means a pathway to the bomb, padding it with billions and billions of dollars. He took up this fake agreement and basically tore it up. He killed Qasem Soleimani. He said, made it very clear, including now, you cannot have a nuclear weapon, which means you cannot enrich. He's been very forceful. So for them, he's enemy number one.
Yeah.
Look.
Yeah, he's trying to picture put Iran in a position that if they go with what I call the mother of all false flags, to maybe assassinate Donald Trump and put it on Iran.
Yeah, well, I believe it. They could certainly do something like that. I believe it. Netanyahu is engaging in propaganda. I would say his main pitch there was to MAGA Americans. You see, the MAGA Americans have already been indoctrinated that Iran was responsible for 9/11. You know, and the average American doesn't know that Iranians aren't Arabs. They think all Muslims are Arabs. And they even think Egyptians are Arabs. So to them, it's all the same. You know, Iran, Iraq, Libya, it's all the same. And so they don't know anything about it. And the propaganda against the Iranian revolution that happened back in the 70s, it's been going on for a very long time. When Khomeini overthrew the Shah of Iran, which was an American puppet, Iran became some kind of theocracy. Before that, it was just an ordinary democracy, which we overthrew and put the Shah of Iran in. Well, it didn't go down well for the Iranians, and after a while, they threw the Shah out. But then they got a government that has religious elements, and of course, that really annoys Western liberals. Really annoys Western liberals. So the painting of Iran as a bad guy is set. It's set in stone, and Netanyahu is playing on that. And I don't know whether they'll have to go so far as to stage a fake attack on Trump's life. And I think that, you know, it's not that they wouldn't do it, but it'd be terrible if it came out and they couldn't suppress it. It would also be terrible if it came out that they attacked one of our bases. And I would imagine, of course, you never know, I would imagine that the Russians should be able to imagine something like that happening and be watching very carefully. And even the Chinese, they should be able to provide evidence whether it was Iran or not. If you're not paying attention, then I think we have to dismiss Russia and China as just basically incompetent, totally incompetent governments that can't even look after themselves. But I hope they're not that bad. Of course, they were caught flat-footed about the attack on their bombing fleet, which is an amazing thing. So how far now you would go? He could do all the things you said. I don't know. He may not feel he has to. Um, just the kinds of talk. And it never occurs to him that Israel illegitimately has nuclear weapons. And a lot of Americans think that Israel was responsible for President John F. Kennedy's assassination because he was going to block their development, their nuclear development in Israel. He had said this was not to happen. And so a lot of people, I don't think Israel was responsible for it. It seems clear it was the CIA and the Joint Chiefs. But there's a growing awareness among that small part of the American people that pay any attention to foreign policy or any kind of policy. Most of them don't pay any attention. But among the ones that do, there's a growing awareness that somehow we are serving Israel's interest, not our interest. And that it's not the interest of peace. And that where is the source of the violence in the Middle East? I mean, who's causing it? It's Israel. Israel and Israel's handmaiden, the United States. And that's the cause. And all the so-called ISIS and all these things, these are all CIA creations. We created them to overthrow Gaddafi, to overthrow Assad. And so the Israelis don't have to go too far to prevail. They just have such a hold. They have a tremendous hold. If what I've said today, if I was employed somewhere, I'd be fired. The Israelis could have me fired instantly. If I was a tenured professor at Harvard, they'd call up Harvard and I'd be dismissed. If I was the editor of the Wall Street Journal, I'd be gone. It's just a tremendous ability they have to shut people down. And so they don't have to do things that are all that desperate or all that risky. They can't know whether Russia is monitoring the American bases. If Russia's not doing it, they're stupid. And I just can't believe that that's stupid. So somebody is watching, because it probably occurred to more people than just you, that there can be false flag events that Israel can use to rope the United States into a war with Iran. 9/11 served that purpose. 9/11 roped the United States into getting rid of 7 countries, 5 of which are gone. So, sure, false flags, they succeed because there's no media to expose them. And just remember the Vietnam War, the Gulf of Tonkin. We were told that the North Vietnamese attacked the American Navy. Didn't do any such thing, but it became the false flag. It's endless. And we arranged false flags. Remember, we arranged some kind of a made-up chemical attack in Syria that we could blame on Assad. So there's always the danger of that, and I would, one of the troubles that Iran faces now is by sitting on their butts and being passive, they're being decapitated, just like Hezbollah. Look at all the top Iranian people who've been lost to both American and Israeli assassinations. You know, a lot of these attacks that Israel does with missiles and all, they're basically assassinations of Iranian leadership. You know, the last couple of times they got the head of the two heads of the intelligence service. They got the commander of the army, you know, that before that they got that famous leader of the Revolutionary Guards. It's hard to have leaders. Leaders are rare. And when you lose one, it's not an easy job to find another one. And the Israelis have probably seriously damaged Iranian leadership. And they completely decapitated Hezbollah. I think Hezbollah's disappeared as a force. I mean, it's 2 years ago, it could have invaded Israel. I don't know what it can do today. So the fate we face, we don't really know, because we can't predict how reckless people will be, how uninformed, how naive, how what. It's very difficult, Nima, to find intelligent discussion or even people raising. You do a good job of getting people on that try to do that. I guess we don't really know much more, but we try to know. We try to pay attention. We do know that the official narratives are wrong.
Thank you so much, Paul, for being with us today. Great pleasure as always.
Well, thank you, Nima. Thank you
See you
very
soon.
much. See
Bye-bye.
you soon.
Bye-bye.